Over the Garden Wall may just be the perfect Halloween cartoon. You know what? Nah. Perfect Halloween special, show, or movie of any kind. It has fall colors and the general vibe that hits a certain nostalgia for longtime Halloween fans. It's got tricks and treats to pull in new viewers under its spell, and it's got a creep factor that will make viewers of any age wonder just what goes bump in the night beyond their backyard. But as I tuned into my favorite modern classic early this September, no, it's not too early, you're too early. Pumpkin Spice started in August, be mad at Starbucks. I noticed one core aspect of Halloween that this show touches upon where other cartoons tend to shy away. I'm talking about the veil that lies just beyond our mortal reach, reminiscent of a cold winter settling in, the 9 to 5 of the Grim Reaper themselves. Over the Garden Wall confronts death. Which I found quite odd in a way because nobody dies in it. Or do they? Sure, we see some people that are clearly dead, and I'll go more into it, but as far as we know, nobody actually canonically is living and then dies during the course of the show. Then I began to notice things about Greg. Unsettling things. Moments here and there that seemed to foreshadow an ending to the show that we never got to see. Maybe one that we were never meant to see. Well, I have a theory about that ending. A film theory! No, we're not doing that bit, shut the Sit back with your pumpkin spice consumables, warm autumn-colored clothing, and background lo-fi Halloween music. God damn, I could listen to that all day. And I'll tell you a tragic tale about two brothers who ventured into the unknown, and only one who came out alive. This is the Greg Pumpkin Theory. Now, I already hear the naysayers. We saw him living and breathing at the end. He and Wirt clearly shared this near-death experience-like event, and we saw the ringing of the bell and the frog. This all proves that they went to the place, and it's very clear. No theory done. Case closed, right? Well, what if I told you that ending was not intended, but rather changed in a last-minute writing to accommodate for the younger audience it was written for? What if I told you the story not only implies consistently that Greg was supposed to die, but that the ending makes so much more sense to the plot and themes of the story? It completes the story in a way that I can't believe I didn't notice until now. Don't believe me? Let's jump right in. Now let's clear up a few things before we dive into the nitty-gritty of this theory. First, what the unknown is and where it is specifically. I honestly don't really understand why there's so much debate about this online. We see Quincy Endicott in their journey to the unknown, and we see Quincy Endicott's grave at the very end in episode 9. And even in Pottsfield, it's pretty clear that these are, they're not alive. That is not something that is alive. I mean, it's alive in a sense, but not in the same sense of flesh and blood, and it's a different place, clearly. No purgatory, no middle ground, a place that dead people are versus a place that living people are. Beyond the grave, so to speak. And I know that the narrator makes this a little bit more obscured at the beginning of the show.
Somewhere lost in the clouded annals of history lies a place that few have seen.
But by the end, it's pretty obvious that, no, this is just beyond the grave. The people here are dead. The next thing I want to clear up is this theory is pretty unconcerned with the idea that this story directly parallels Dante's Inferno. Is there evidence that there are lots of parallels and maybe a little bit of influence written into the story? Absolutely. But the complete parallelism I would refute just because it seems like there are more slight elements involved from Dante's Inferno, maybe even in terms of story structure. But in terms of themes and character development, the two differ pretty greatly, so I'm not really going to be addressing any Dante's Inferno comparisons in this theory specifically. A comparison we are going to be drawing much more from are Brothers Grimm fairy tales, and fairy tales in general. The Old English fairy tales seem to have a lot more to do with the style and vibe of this show. How often in old fairy tales do unsuspecting children end up in a scary place that puts them in some sort of danger? And on that note, how often do these fairy tales end with a happy story? I did a bit of academic research on the origins of Brothers Grimm fairy tales. One collection of stories that's more well known, including The Wolf and Seven Young Kids, Hansel and Gretel, and Red Riding Hood, are considered to be warning tales meant to scare children about certain life lessons, and what consequences you might face if you don't learn those lessons. In these stories, children are exposed to hostile powers without protection of adults.
Go save your friend and get yourself home! Okay.
So young listeners can learn how dangerous it is to open the door for strangers or go along with them without questioning. And here's a fun tidbit. Even the friends and associates of the Grimm brothers expressed concern over exposing children to these household tales because of how violent they could be. But instead of including any sort of subtitle or warning, such as parental guidance advised, they instead expressed the view of the educational importance of these stories being passed on and preserved as they are, and felt that cruelties, for example, children play butchering each other and parents eating their children, should not be omitted because such incidents were inherent in folk tradition. A sentiment that I believe Patrick McHale, the creator of Over the Garden Wall, would have maybe shared. If you're saying, nah, Patrick McHale works on pretty light stuff, I can't imagine it would be so dark as to kill a child. Well, I dug up some videos on YouTube about some animated projects he worked on before Over the Garden Wall, and, let me just play this clip. Oh, hey, that guy looks kinda like Greg. Huh, what an odd coincidence. Holy shit. So that was obviously a pretty direct comparison, and here's another short film that he created just to get in your head that Patrick McHale is very, very capable of having a darker story. And honestly, just go watch the entirety of The Adventures of Flapjack and tell me homie doesn't have a twisted dark side.
You'll need it to get the bugs out of your hair.
It's not a coincidence this guy's name is Punsy McHale.
I see you're not yellow, fellow, but I don't want to make you blue. So get a clue and purple the plug before you played, or I'll arrange a rainbow on your parade.
Alright, if that's still not enough, here's a tweet from Patrick McHale, which is an old sketch from early Over the Garden Wall development days. Horror. Tales from the dark. I feel the dark veil descending. Kill your sleep. From Wirt. I see nothing suspicious here.
Oh, potatoes and molasses.
Alright, now with all that cleared up, let's get into some of the early foreshadow.
How the gentle wind beckons through the leaves.
This first one specifically made me want to start writing this theory in the first place. At the very beginning of every episode, we see title cards, and whatever the episode is, that little circle is blacked out. You want to know what's also seemingly blacked out and shaded in every single one of these examples? Greg, in the top left corner. Wirt is clearly lit, every other panel is also clearly lit, except for the episode that we're on, and for some reason, Greg is also shadowed out. It's almost like every episode that we're on is passing. Interesting.
Coincidence? I think not!
I'd also like to point out that the Beast is shown to be a straight-up Grim Reaper with a scythe and everything. I also just noticed that only 3 of these don't get blacked out. The Grim Reaper, the dog who we mistake for the Beast in episode 1, and what looks like a depiction of the Huntsman. All 3 of these potentially symbolizing the Beast itself, death itself, passing. And I just want to point out that the creators are certainly privy to some very minor details throughout the show. In episode 1, we see the woodsman break this bluebird porcelain, and it is barely on screen for even a couple frames. And that is clearly foreshadowing where we're going to learn about Beatrice and her family. Also, the vignette scenes at the beginning foreshadow a ton of different elements that are going to be present throughout the show. Also, look at these paintings in Endicott's mansion. These are also telling their own story, maybe of how Endicott died, or maybe about his life before he died. Okay, so you're getting an idea that there's no details too small, Patrick McHale is a dark and twisted lad, and there are a lot of heavy themes with Brothers Grimm related to this show. Let's get into some of the more obvious foreshadow that we can make some more direct comparisons with.
Who's out there?
One of the most iconic and lovable things about Over the Garden Wall is its music. Not just its soundtrack, but the lyrics to many of the songs that are woven within it. Let's take a moment to look at the lyrics to some of these songs, because when you realize how dripping it is in the imagery of death, it seems a little odd that there are no deaths anywhere throughout the show. There are a few songs that I think are foreshadowing Greg's potential death, and I don't want to spend too much time going over every single second of it, but let's do an in-depth look at the first song that we hear at the very beginning of the story, Into the Unknown. Led through the mist by the milk light of moon. All that was lost is revealed. Our long bygone burdens, mere echoes of the spring. Where have we come, and where shall we end? Now, one of the things the huntsman tells Wirt at the very beginning is,
everyone has a torch to burn, and this here is mine. This is my burden.
The death of his daughter is his burden to bear. So we already see a relation to bygone burdens, and mere echoes of the spring. We look at the theming of Halloween and the original origins in paganism, which would be the holiday Samhain. One of the most important aspects of this time of year is the fact that we are transitioning into winter. And winter is not just a symbol for the seasons changing, the temperature getting colder, it's also symbolic of death, and the acceptance of passing over to another time. If dreams can't come true, then why not pretend? If our loved ones can't come back, let's make up stories and bask in the memory. Why I think this line is so key to this theory is because if Greg did die, one of the hugest things that we would not have known that was clarified at the end, what I believe to have been rewritten for the younger audience, is that we don't actually know if any of this story is true. This could just be Wirt's coping mechanism for the fact that he let his brother die. Usually we would tend to think that it did happen, but he's not going to be able to convince anyone of it for sure. And thus, if dreams can't come true, then why not pretend? This line potentially hints at the idea that this whole story is Wirt creating a coping mechanism of his stepbrother's death. And when we hit that beautiful line that just makes you think of fall colors,
how the gentle wind beckons through the leaves as autumn colors fall.
this is also a symbol of death.
Once again, you ruined my life.
How the gentle wind beckons through the leaves as the autumn colors fall, again, the changing of the weather being a symbol for this cold death. Dancing in a swirl of golden memories, the loveliest lies of all. Is it all a lie? Is the story potentially something that Wirt never really experienced? A story that he told because of his burden that he bears, the guilt, and the fact that in his own soul, maybe he is the beast now. Maybe the burden of carrying this lantern around is more symbolic than it is literal. And it's actually the burden of feeling like you're responsible for Greg's death, that he's going to have to carry for the rest of his life. Now let's look at another iconic song, Over the Garden Wall, sung by Greg's Frog. At night when the lake is a mirror, and the moon rides the wave to the shore. More nighttime. It's nighttime. A single soul sets his voice singing, content to be slightly forlorn. Perhaps an individual feeling forlorn because they're mourning something. The next few lines indicate that this song is traveling somewhere. After it's traveled, then two voices are singing together, then 10. And as the melody soars round the shimmering pond and all are joining in, as it carries their reverie on. Reverie is referring to a dream, something that we wish could be real. Then softly it falls by a house near a stream, which reminds us of the house at the beginning of Over the Garden Wall. To thee, singing a song about and to the one who was lost. There is also the Song of the Beast, which I don't think I need to spend too much time going into how that one's just, submit to your death, you're dying, just accept it. Not terrible advice. What? You gotta give up sometime. It's not like your willpower is gonna keep you going forever. And let's look at the song Two of Us, that Wirt sings with not his brother, but the girl. This brings up a point that I'm going to develop further in this theory, which is this is a cautionary tale, a Brothers Grimm-like fairy tale, for the audience that's based on Wirt's neglect of Greg. Greg specifically says before going here,
As long as it's not that broken down.
It's perfect.
Ain't that just the way? Ain't that just the way? It's almost like Greg is a little more accepting of what the Beast is asking for than Wirt would be. It's almost like Wirt is the one resisting this inevitable fate, and that's why he's the one who ends up back. Now, the song Two of Us obviously is Wirt not paying attention to Greg, but it also totally parallels the reason that they actually got here in the first place. Wirt was feeling insecure about his relationship with Sarah, or lack thereof, rather. And because he was worried about another guy hitting on her,
Jason Thunderburger.
he sends Greg to distract them, which is what kicks this entire chase scene into motion that sends Wirt to decide that they should jump over the garden wall. And even at the end of this scene, after the definitely creepiest part of this entire series, where they are running away from the ghost girl,
Sorry, my turtles, but I must see.
what do we see but Wirt and Greg fall into a river, and Wirt cannot find him. Sure, Greg shows up right after, and they walk away, but Wirt is specifically not able to find him. Now back to the flashback scene that this seems to be paralleling. At the very start of that episode, when Wirt is putting on his costume to go and seems like he's hyping himself up to go talk to Sarah and give her that tape, the song that plays there,
The angels have gone, the songs have gone silent.
the angels have gone, the suns have gone silent, you're sinking like a stone. Before the tide, the river runs cold, the fight is over. Still the haunted ruins of night call your name. I'm sorry, but it just sounds like this has more to do with Wirt's internal guilt than it does them just going on a fantastical adventure and coming back unharmed. All of these things are pointing towards a much more grim end than what we actually got to experience. And as they fall into the river towards the end of that episode, thus concluding the flashback and showing how we ended up over the garden wall in the first place, we hear the song Old Black Train.
There's an old black train coming, scraping along the aisle. You don't need no ticket, boys.
You don't need no ticket, boys, it'll take you when it's time. Which I guess is not now for either of them? Oh well, guess we'll just throw out all that foreshadow, clearly didn't mean anything. Now to analyze the song that ties the whole theory together.
Oh, potatoes and molasses.
Nah, I'm just kidding. That's just a silly tune that's very enjoyable. Now, the next song I want to go over is the one that we hear in Pottsfield, which brings us to our next portion of the theory. Episode 2 has a lot to dissect. First of all, assuming that the first night is Halloween night, this is the day that they have actually crossed over, All Saints' Day. Again, back to pagan lore, when the veil between worlds begins to start widening again. Halloween night is when it is at its thinnest, and this is when it begins to have some distance again. Before I tie in the song, let's just go step by step. Oh, and here we are. Greg stepped into a pumpkin. He's got 1 foot in the grave, right? Come on. Is that not 1 foot in the grave? The boys come across this strange town where everybody seems to be in this weird pumpkin cult, and one girl says that,
Say, aren't you a little too early? I mean, it doesn't seem like you're ready to join us just yet.
Wirt specifically. Nobody says this to Greg. Greg seems pretty ready. Alright, I'm starting to lean pretty into this theory, but I'm actually convinced of this. This is not for entertainment. You like and subscribe right now while I'm in the middle of this, and look at our channel. We are mostly a reaction content channel. This theory is something that I'm just passionate about and needed to get out to the public, because I haven't seen it anywhere. Okay, little detail. I think this next part is gonna make even the most skeptical of viewers think twice about what the intention of this ending should have been. You know who Enoch is? I mean, aside from the creepy cult lord, who we also find out to be a cat. I don't really know how that works. That's not part of this theory. If you feel like it relates, feel free to jump on in. Enoch is the son of Cain in the story Cain and Abel, the biblical story, which I don't really know about. I had to do a pretty decent amount of research to figure this out. But when I looked it up, I realized that Enoch was the son of Cain, and Cain killed his brother and was therefore marked by God. And Enoch, even granted jokingly, says that
I find you guilty of trespassing, destruction of property, disturbing the peace, and murder.
Look, that was a very funny joke, and obviously it's playing with the juxtaposition of it seeming very ominous, but it being not very ominous.
Oh no, not murder. But for those other crimes,
But the fact that the guy who said its name is literally Enoch based on a story where one brother kills another, granted in this case it's potentially by accident, but still, it hits a different way if Greg actually dies at the end of the story, and is that really a coincidence?
Coincidence? I think not!
Now later we find that the pumpkin people are skeletons that have presumably been living people that died and are now coming back to their second life beyond the grave and having a little cult party. Kinda sounds awesome, not gonna lie. But at one point, we cut to a pumpkin man in the distance, holding a white flag, which happens to be the flag of surrender. Surrender, the thing that the beast is hoping that he will get the young boys to do. Ain't that just the way? Also, this is why I called it the Greg Pumpkin theory. It's because there's a chance that this guy is literally the pumpkin that is waiting for Greg's actual inevitable death. Again, this isn't the kind of show that just cuts randomly to unrelated things. I will repeat the same meme twice to reiterate this point.
Coincidence? I think not!
And since we're talking about Greg's acceptance, I also just want to make a little note to the fact that Greg seems totally unperturbed by the fact that there are potentially ghosts walking around Endicott's mansion.
I really, really want to see a ghost. Really bad.
Oh! In a way, he's actually speaking with a ghost because Endicott is confirmed dead. The rest of that episode is surprisingly void of most things I would want to put in this theory, but I'm gonna put in one sentence that, maybe I'll grant you is grasping for straws a little bit.
You're a sweet boy with good sense.
Huh, 2 pennies in the water. Remind you of something?
'Cause Uncle Endicott pegged me all wrong. I've got no sense. No sense at all.
Maybe he's saying I have no senses? As in I have no human senses? 'Cause I'm dead? Alright, think what you will of that one, but the rest of it makes a lot of sense. Let's go into Greg's journey over the garden wall and see just how many little things there could be that make you start to question what it was actually building to, if not his death. Alright, there's a lot of these, so I'm just gonna get through them quickly. Number 1, Greg is the first person to see the Elderwood tree. Number 2, Greg always seems to find the black turtles, starting in episode 1, but consistently throughout the rest of the show. Black turtles definitely seem correlated to what made the beast the beast. It seems like it's got something to do with the oil in the trees, and even when we see the dog eat one of the turtles at the very beginning, his eyes are the exact same as the beast. Now, some of you might be saying, well, Auntie Whispers didn't turn into the beast. Well, Auntie Whispers is voiced by Tim Curry, and that man has a tolerance to human souls already. Okay, obviously I'm joking, but I mean, come on, Auntie Whispers doesn't exactly look like she's the most normal of all the people that you run into in this place. Maybe she's well on her way to be pretty beast-like herself. Also, Auntie Whispers even says,
You meant it'd be the turtles that smell so right.
The turtles smell like young children, which really wouldn't make sense unless they were actually made from the souls of young children, which, again, Tim Curry, questionable. Never question Tim Curry, he's an icon. And speaking of the dog that ate the black turtles, that's the first time of many times throughout the show that we find Greg fall into the river and Wirt exclaiming that he cannot find him. Beatrice's line when she first meets the boys.
You two are lost kids with no purpose in life, right?
Uh-huh.
Greg responds, but Wirt doesn't have the same sentiment. Still clinging to life, I suppose. This line, classics like,
Ain't that just the way?
And honestly, the general sentiment of Greg just being accepting of most things going on is also perfectly aligned with what the Beast is hoping that they will do. It's not just about giving up will, it's about accepting death. It's about accepting that you're going to be part of the earth and ultimately become one of these trees eventually. Greg falling into the mud and Wirt really not feeding him. Now, this is actually a pretty important part of the story. Strangely looks off into the distance as Wirt is doing his own thing. He commented that he was hungry and hasn't been fed. Wirt is ignoring the fact that his little brother needs food. And he even just starts looking far more sickly from this point on. And if we go back to a different line from the huntsman,
Fall ill or lose hope, and your life shall pass into his crooked hands.
Greg is falling ill and Wirt's not doing anything about it. That just gave us another premise for what might make the Beast take you. The Beast, I think, pretty clearly symbolizing an agent of death. Now I also want to talk about Greg accepting parting with the frog at the end of that really swanky jazz episode. The one on the boat, oof, I like that. Now this is where I think things might have started to become changed from the creator's original intent. Greg accepted that the frog was having a better reality where he was, and totally accepts that the frog is passing on to a different life. Even though it does play into his character, the fact that the frog immediately comes back after that scene really doesn't make any sense. I remember watching this on my rewatch and be like, wait, why did the frog actually come back? It makes way more sense for Greg to just accept it, and for that to just be a cool thing for him to comprehend and process, in contrast to Wirt's super worrying nature. The frog clearly doesn't even have a crucial role in the rest of the show. Oh wait, until the very end, when it shows that he in fact ate the bell, and that's the proof that all of this really happened. Greg says goodbye to the frog, and it doesn't matter at all because we needed the frog back in the picture for this neatly packaged ending that they gave us. There's really no other reason why the frog would be there. And wow, what an easy thing to change in your story writing at the last minute, because all you need to do is be like, just keep the frog with him, let him eat the bell, and bingo bango, they're in reality again.
And so the story is complete, and everyone is satisfied with the ending.
And for what it's worth, narratively, I feel like it ruins the brilliance of the question of if it was truly real or not, when we do just see a weird moment of pure confirmation in the last couple seconds of the episode. Yeah, I would have preferred not to know. I would have preferred to have there be much more obscurity over the concept, just like, honestly, the thing that it's emulating, Wizard of Oz. And yes, it is not lost on me that all the friends at the party were also in Greg's fever heaven dream, which... Come on, he literally left his body and went to heaven. Need I analyze that any further? Now, like I said, this is all about the theme. This is all about what hits harder for the moral of the story, which ends up being to love the people around you and not take them for granted. To take care of them and be mindful of them, especially if they're younger and you have a sort of responsibility to take care of them. This is so Brothers Grimm in the storytelling, and it's where we go to the next part of the theory. So I've mentioned that Wirt's general lack of concern is pretty much why this theme would hit so much harder if Greg were to actually die. As Huntsman says at the very beginning,
You are the elder child. You are responsible. It is your burden to bear.
And the Huntsman would know a little something about burdens to bear, being that he said that his was the burden of his dead daughter. Now in episode 9, Wirt's negligence is very much hammered home. He's always frustrated with Greg.
You and your stupid dad! You're always prodding me, trying to get me to join marching band. Once again, you ruined my life.
Now, if we're looking at tragic storytelling, it is textbook to say something like that to somebody that those are your last words that you ever get to say to them. And if the last thing that Wirt remembers in his conscious memory before the two of them plummet, one of which to their death, the other to be one with survivor's guilt,
I don't want to have anything to do with you or that frog.
It would make so much sense that this ends up as a cautionary tale because of how horrible he feels after the last words that he really said to his brother being those of hatred. Now let's go to episode 6 when they're on the boat. This is one of the times where we see water in the series where they don't just immediately fall straight into it. And yet, what does Wirt say only moments after they've been discovered sneaking onto the boat?
But that's because Greg threw all our money away. You take him, not me!
Bruh. You just threw your brother under the train! I had to go there. And let's not forget, from this episode forth is when Wirt's negligence begins to peak, emphasizing the Brothers Grimm cautionary tale. This is what happens when you just decide to ignore and ignore and ignore. You're not gonna have forever to do it, and one day, they're gonna die, and if it's your fault, you're gonna feel pretty damn awful for it. During that scene, we also get the song Over the Garden Wall, which we analyzed earlier, and at the end of this episode, Greg falls straight into the mud. The earth, falling underneath the crust as the beast asks him to do in his song, where he wants him to become a seed for the trees. Speaking of the beast, it's time for the final part of this theory. Anyone can become the beast. This is not the story of close calls and meaningful friendships. This is the story of Wirt turning into the huntsman. Turning into the beast. This is a cautionary tale about feeling guilty about someone's death because you weren't good enough to them in their lives. This is the moral that you tell people so that they cherish and value people's lives while they're still living, and so that they don't walk around with this burden of guilt, this lantern of sorrow in their hearts for the rest of their days. Now, if you're out here saying, oh, well, the huntsman's daughter didn't die, we saw her at the end too. Oh my gosh. If that doesn't just clearly prove that that was a phoned-in last-minute rewrite, I don't know what does. I remember the first time I ever watched this show, I thought there is no way that the daughter is still alive. That doesn't make any sense.
No sense. No sense at all.
It makes way more sense, not just for the plot, but for the symbolism and the theming of the story, that not only Greg, but the huntsman's daughter should be dead. Now let's not forget about the people from the tavern and the warning that they gave to Wirt.
Pilgrim, he who carries the dark lantern must be the beast.
Okay, well hold on. We clearly see the beast is an external figure, and is not actually the huntsman himself, right? They interact differently, one has a whole body, which by the way, oh my god, look at this nightmare fuel for a second. Another thing that was foreshadowed throughout this story is that Greg is always looking out for his brother and always trying to keep him upbeat and trying to save his life. So it only makes sense that after his extremely trippy double near-death experience? So if he's already having a near-death experience and then he leaves his body and goes to heaven and has another one, I guess just makes more sense that it's a full death experience, doesn't it? Wow, that part of the theory just wrote itself. Anyway, after that whole trippy thing, he makes a deal with the devil? An angel? Death itself? It's unclear, but what he wants to do is clear. Take the place of Wirt dying. I'm here to save his life so that he can live on. Which really would only further the feeling of guilt in Wirt's heart. And after the line, he who holds the lantern must be the beast, and they start running out of the tavern, Wirt grabs Greg, and then immediately after grabs a lantern. Which, to me, draws a very clear connection between the two of them. When we look at all of these things, every time Wirt didn't save Greg, every time Greg fell into the river and Wirt couldn't find him, every mean thing Wirt ever said, and every time Greg accepted what was going on, all of it leads to a single conclusion. The real moral of this story and what we should all learn from is to love and cherish the people in our lives, and not be caught in any of the malice or drama that makes us try to distance ourselves from the ones that we love. Let's do one last thing before we close out. Let's watch the ending like this, and let's see how much harder this message hits home, and how much more sensible the ending is.
You have figured it out, and I thought you might give up.
Give up? I'll never give up. Just gotta wait. Just gotta wait.
Yes, just sit there in the cold and wait.
Greg? Greg?
Let's get him out of this, come on!
Yeah. Come on!
It's gonna be fine, Wirt.
Goodbye, Beatrice.
Goodbye, Wirt.
One is a bird, two are the trees, three is the wind in the leaves, four are the stars, five with the moon.
Wirt, you okay? Can you see me, Wirt?
Where am I?
Hospital.
A hospital? Greg, where's Greg?
The loveliest lies of all.
Maybe, in an alternate world, where the story was written as originally intended, Greg is enjoying a peaceful retirement in the land of Pottsfield, while Wirt becomes the beast that could potentially lie inside all of us, and carries his burden throughout the rest of his life. Thank you for watching. This is Jester Lou from Jester Brothers Cartoon Theater. And happy Halloween.